Hi and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. This time around we're doing more of the cinematic hidden gems. I'm going through the alphabet, doing 5 movies from each letter of the alphabet, 2 lots at a time. We're up to the letters O and the letter P. Not sure what I'm going to do about Q and R, but I'm going to see how I go. But in the meantime, let's start with the letter O. This one I had to put in because I put the prequel to it in when I did the letter I. It is Lindsay Anderson's 1973 movie, Oh Lucky Man, starring Malcolm McDowell as Mick Travis. It's the second of the Mick Travis trilogy, the third one being Britannia Hospital. And the supporting cast of this is pretty good as well. A few people you might know: Ralph Richardson's in there, Rachel Roberts, Arthur Lowe, Helen Mirren, Moira Washburn, and it follows the life of Mick Travis as he becomes a coffee salesman and learns a lot about the multinational coffee industry. It's a very didactic movie, as indeed was the first one, and it talks about capitalism and talks about how some countries go to war for economic reasons rather than purely a matter of survival. It's a mad film. It's got a really interesting kind of leitmotif where the singer-songwriter Alan Price sings songs from the soundtrack as a way of kind of setting up the next bit of the movie and also commenting on what we've just seen in the film. And you see Alan Price in a recording studio with a microphone and a piano singing the songs, and it makes for a very odd film. But it's worthwhile. It's transgressive. It's one of those movies that stays with you and you think about it for a while after you watched it. But it does have some commentary stuff. It's got a commentary by Malcolm McDowell, Alan Price, and the screenwriter David Sherwin. It has new features, career profile, Oh Lucky Malcolm. There's a vintage featurette as well called Oh Lucky Man, Innovations in Entertainment, which is such a dated kind of title, and a theatrical trailer as well. This is a UK DVD that I got a number of years ago, and I think I'm going to watch all 3 of the Mick Travis movies at some stage in the future, one after the other, just like bang, bang, bang. And I think I'll enjoy them. And Oh Lucky Man is a movie that's not quite like any other movie you've seen, and that's a very good thing. The next movie I'm sneaking in under its original title rather than the English language title. I'm fudging things a little bit, but I think this is an important enough movie to do that. It's from 1959, and it won an Academy Award, and rightly so. Orfeo Negro, Black Orpheus, which is a retelling of the Orpheus and Eurydice legend, set in the favelas of Rio de Janeiro in the late 1950s. This movie was so influential, apart from being a beautiful film, beautifully shot, beautifully acted, and with a passion and a lust for life that is unequaled in cinema in some ways. The music in this by Luis Bonfa and Antonio Carlos Jobim had an impact on American popular music for the next decade. I listened to the soundtrack in the car the other day, and it made me want to review this movie even more. It's a beautifully shot film, and it's a wonderful piece of cinema. It's tragic, but kind of hopeful at the same time, because the legend of Orpheus and Eurydice is ultimately a tragic story. But this one's a UK release, which is region-free, and I'm always a big fan of region-free videos. This should be in your collection. There are a number of different editions of it out, and it doesn't particularly matter which one you get. You don't necessarily need a lot of extras to watch Orfeo Negro and enjoy it. It is just one of the best movies of the 1950s for me, and it shows a culture that people weren't particularly familiar with at the time. The 2 stars of Bruno Mello and Marpesa Dawn are fantastic. They weren't experienced actors, but they really sell the story and sell their characters. And there's rarely been a movie where the music and the action and the dialogue and everything to do with the people on screen is so beautifully integrated. It really has a magic about it that it should be in your collection, and you should watch it every now and then just to remind yourself how life-affirmingly wonderful cinema can be. High recommendation. Now, this one's a bit of a rarity. Not many people talk about it because some people said it wasn't a good film, but I like it a lot. It's based on a 1941 musical where the music was written by Kurt Weill and the book was written by, amongst other people, S.J. Perelman, who was an enormously talented comedy writer who also wrote for the Marx Brothers. The stars of it are fantastic. You've got Ava Gardner, Dick Haymes, who was a crooner of the 1940s, Eve Arden, Olga San Juan, and Tom Conway, the brother of George Sanders. And it's One Touch of Venus. It's about a guy who works in a department store and they're setting up a special display for some fashion stuff. And a statue of the goddess Venus is brought in for a bit of stage prop. And it comes to life, and it's Ava Gardner. Now, Ava Gardner in this is as sensual an actress as you're ever going to see in anything. She is marvellous in this. They kept some of the songs from the musical, and her voice is dubbed, but Ava Gardner puts across the goddess Venus fantastically. It also stars Robert Walker as a kind of love interest, and Robert Walker was an actor who people might remember from Strangers on a Train with Farley Granger. And he kind of does the comedy interestingly, but I'm not sure whether comedy was his forte. He was a bit of a troubled guy with alcohol problems, amongst other things. But One Touch of Venus, I love. There's Ava Gardner on the back, and it is a fantastic little hidden gem. The musical parts of it don't particularly matter as much as the comedy of errors. And Venus, who is quite out there for 1948, disrupts the lives of everybody she encounters in a good way. It's a lot of fun, this one, and I love it a lot. It has been remade, of course, amongst other things, as Mannequin in the 1980s, but always go back to the original, and One Touch of Venus is well worth checking out. And Ava Gardner was never lovelier or sexier than in this film. The last three over the letter O I've talked about on the channel before, but it doesn't hurt to remind people how good they are. This one's from 1961, and it's Billy Wilder's take on the Cold War and the ideological stubbornness of both sides of the Cold War. Stars James Cagney, Horst Buchholz, Pamela Tiffin, and Arlene Francis, and it is 1, 2, 3. And this is mad, full-on, crazy Billy Wilder stuff, where he mocks both sides of the Cold War. Jimmy Cagney plays a guy who's the corporate head of Coca-Cola in West Berlin during the Cold War, before the Berlin Wall was put up, so people could travel between the two sides. And he's trying to get Coca-Cola franchises in the Russian Empire, in a sense. It's funny, it's silly. It comes from that viewpoint of, you got to remember, Billy Wilder as an Austrian spent a lot of his time before the war in Germany, and he knew the culture really well, and he knew the breaking points of the culture and the cultural silliness of that part of the world. Now, this is the Eureka version of it, and it's as good a version as you're going to get. There are a lot of extras in there. There are some interviews with some film historians and scholars. There's a collector's booklet featuring new essays by film scholar Henry K. Miller, critic Adam Batty, and archival material. If you're a fan of Billy Wilder's stuff, this is one of the touch points of his later career. He made a couple of films after this, but they weren't anywhere near as good as 1, 2, 3. And the savageness of his satire of the Cold War era is something special and something extra delightful, and you should watch it. The next one is a rarity. It's a Marlon Brando directed film from 1961, just like 1, 2, 3 was from 1961. One-Eyed Jacks. Now, this was in public domain for a while, so there are lots of different copies of this out there. But I like this one, which is from Arrow Academy. I only watched this one recently for the first time, and I did a whole video about it. It's one of the most beautifully shot westerns ever. It's got Carl Malden in it as well. Katie Gerardo's in it, Ben Johnson. And Pina Pelicha, who is a Mexican actress, plays the main love interest in it. In it, Brando plays a outlaw called Rio, who's kind of mentored by Carl Malden's character. And he's betrayed, and he gets away and kind of goes on a rampage against them. It's just a lovely western. And it was hard to get made too, because the studio didn't like Brando doing things his way. But it wouldn't be the western that we now treasure had he not got his own way with these things. It went over budget. It wasn't a financial success. But it's one of those 1960s westerns that showed you there was still some meat on the bone in the westerns after they were all over the place, particularly in the 1950s. And One-Eyed Jacks is one you should watch, and watch it on as big a screen as you can, because it is a lush, beautifully shot and beautifully made western. The last one from 1966 is so bad it's good. And I put it in here partly because one of the stars died recently. It was directed by Russell Rouse, based on a screenplay by Harlan Ellison, starring Stephen Boyd, Elka Summer, Milton Berle, Ellen Parker, Joseph Cotton, Jill St. John, and Tony Bennett. The Oscar. Now, this is the Kino Lorber version of it, and I think this is one of the only versions out there. It's got a few extras on it, but the Oscar, which is about an actor who is ascending through the ranks of Hollywood and ends up being nominated for a Best Actor Oscar. And there's some funny bits in it. There are tons of cameos in it. We get Jill St. John playing a stripper. We get Elka Summer playing an ambitious woman. We get Eleanor Parker playing an older woman with whom the Stephen Boyd character has a liaison because she is a studio executive. And it's got this really odd hipster dialogue that Harlan Ellison put in there. It's almost like every line of dialogue in this movie needs to have bongo drums underneath it. It's bad in the best possible way, and it's over the top. Tons and tons of cameos. Even people like Frank Sinatra turn up. Milton Berle does a serious role in this movie. I like it. It is so bad it's good, but it's something really different from mid-1960s Hollywood. Not a success. The studio hated it. It killed Harlan Ellison's career as a feature film screenwriter, but it is just a mad thing. And this is a really nice transcription of it. It's in 1.66 to 1 ratio. You should have this in your collection and watch it and appreciate just how much Tony Bennett wasn't a good actor and how much Harlan Ellison's dialogue sings in a really weird key. That one should be in your collection. So let's get on to the letter P. And a really magical film from 1951. Coincidentally, this one also stars Ava Gardner. And it's one that bears some resemblance to things like Powell and Pressburger's The Red Shoes. It's got that same kind of otherworldly vibe like The Red Shoes and like A Matter of Life and Death. It's Pandora and the Flying Dutchman with James Mason in it as well. And in it, Ava Gardner plays Pandora, who meets a man who is actually the captain of the Flying Dutchman, who is fated to sail the seas forever. It's exotic, it's beautifully shot. It was directed by Albert Lewin, who also directed The Picture of Dorian Gray. And it looks lovely. It's beautifully shot, and it's one of those kind of supernatural love stories. This one doesn't get mentioned much either, but anybody who's seen it loves it. I've talked to a few people about it who've seen it, and they always go, yeah, I love that movie. It really is something extraordinary. And if you're going to do an Ava Gardner double feature from the 50s, I'd put Pandora and the Flying Dutchman along with the Barefoot Contessa. I think it's got that similar vibe about it. And I love the Barefoot Contessa as well. In fact, when I go back again and do another alphabetical run through the hidden gems, I may well put that one in. But this one, good date film, beautifully shot, beautifully acted, and something a little bit different and special for the 1950s. Got a few rom-coms this time around. It's purely a coincidence again. But this one I love. It was directed by George Axelrod. In fact, I picked up this copy for $2, it says on the back here. Based upon a story by Julien Duvivier and Henri Janson. It's actually a remake of a French film, but very much twisted it and adapted a lot. Fantastic soundtrack by Nelson Riddle. From 1964, Paris went at Sizzles with Audrey Hepburn and William Holden. It also has Noel Coward in it. Basically, William Holden plays Richard Benson, an alcoholic but very talented screenwriter who has basically pissed away the money he was given to write a screenplay for a movie they only had a title for, which is The Girl That Stole the Eiffel Tower. And it's the weekend before he has to hand in the script, and he's got nothing. He has got absolutely no idea what this movie is going to be about. And so he locks himself in a beautiful Paris hotel room and gets a typist to come in so that he can dictate the whole screenplay. The typist, they said, happens to be played by Audrey Hepburn.
Miss Simpson, did you ever realize that Frankenstein and My Fair Lady are the same story? One ends happily, and the other one doesn't.
And while they're doing the meet cute and the kind of romance thing, on Bastille Day, they start getting the screenplay together. And this thing is a meta-narrative on the tropes and limitations of Hollywood and the products that Hollywood puts out. And it is great. It has snappy dialogue. It has dream sequences. It has visualizations of the screenplay. He's narrating to Gabrielle, the typist, played by Audrey Hepburn. It's just a lot of fun. I think in the third act it falls apart a little bit and turns into a comedy chase kind of thing. But the chemistry between Hepburn and Holden is magical. They did have an affair at one stage, but they long since not. She was married to Mel Ferrer, and he was otherwise engaged himself. I think he's in a relationship with Capuchin. This one is a bit of a hidden gem. Again, it's another film that didn't do well at the box office, but it's magical, and it's got some of the best dialogue about writing Hollywood screenplays that you're going to get in a 1960s film. It's got a little bit of that kind of cynicism that a good Billy Wilder movie has. And Paris When It Sizzles is one you should check out. Apart from anything else, Audrey Hepburn was lovely. Next one up is a French film from 1937, which spawned 2 American remakes, and also a Warner Brothers cartoon character. It's Julien Duvivier's Pépé le Moko, starring Jean Gabon as Pépé, a criminal living in the Casbah in Algiers, and who is hiding from the police. He's a very successful criminal, but the police can't touch him while he's in the Casbah because the local people love him, and he's a big part of the community, and the cops just can't touch him. And Inspector Sleman is after him and tries to find various ways to lure Pépé out of the Casbah so he can be arrested. Coincidentally, Pépé falls in love with a female tourist, and she ultimately leads to his downfall. It's a beautifully shot film. They actually made a fake Casbah in a movie studio in the south of France. This is Jean Gabon before he got old and crusty when he was doing the Maigret movies and things like that. And it's a kind of adventure, romance kind of film. And it had 2 remakes, one of which was incredibly successful in Hollywood. That one was made a year after Pépé le Moko, and it's called Algiers. And it starred Charles Boyer and Hedy Lamarr. And it's from the Charles Boyer character that the character of Pépé Le Pew was made by Warner Brothers Cartoons. So Pépé Le Pew is a direct result of Pépé le Moko. So in 1948, they even did another remake called Casbah, which was a musical version starring Tony Martin and Yvonne De Carlo. And I've seen them all, and this version is by far the superior version. Apart from anything else, Pépé le Moko doesn't have the problems of censorship that Algiers and Casbah had. So it's a little more gritty and a little more grounded and a little more dangerous feeling than those ones. It's a wonderful film, and I like watching it every now and then because I like seeing the range of the career of Jean Gabon, from being a young leading man to being a well-respected and really heavy in the gravitas character actor. You should check that one out. It's a hidden gem. This one's a fairly well-known comedy, but I love it anyway. This one's a very well-known comedy, but I love it anyway for the different levels it has in it and for the stars. Rock Hudson, Doris Day, Tony Randall, and Selma Ritter. Pillow Talk, directed by Michael Gordon. Basically, it's a story of a party line that 2 people share. It's a shared phone line they used to have when there were enough phone lines. And one of them is a Playboy songwriter called Brad Allen, played by Rock Hudson, who's playing like a stud alpha male. And Doris Day plays Jan Morrow, who's an interior decorator. Every time she wants to use the line to do business, he's chatting up some girl on the line. They have a very antagonistic relationship. And almost by accident, Brad sees Doris Day's character and goes, yeah, I want some of that. And so he pretends to be somebody else, a kind of, an outdoorsman from the south who's played as being a little bit gay, which is kind of meta given that Rock Hudson himself was gay. It's beautifully shot and amusingly shot. Thelma Ritter steals the movie as Doris Day's housekeeper, who's got an antagonistic relationship of her own with the elevator operator in the building, played by Alan Jenkins. It's just fun, and people are talking about Doris Day being a professional virgin, but this one has a bit of spark and a bit of sizzle to it. and I like it a lot. And yeah, you should watch it if you haven't watched it already. It's beautifully done, and that meta level of Rock Hudson playing a straight stud who's playing a slightly gay character to get the body maybe of Doris Day's character. It's mad. G-rated for some reason, but there's a lot of subtext and silliness in this one. And there are times when you just need a classic rom-com because you've had a shit day. You know, you want to have something that's totally different from the day you've had. And a rom-com like Pillow Talk is the one to go with. Last of all, we've got another Billy Wilder movie. There's some themes in today's video. This one's from 1970. And it was a passion project by Billy Wilder and his screenwriting partner, I.A.L. Diamond. Stars Robert Stevens, Colin Blakely, The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes, which is hilarious. It's a little bit steampunk in some ways. It's really amusing. Robert Stevens does a really good job of playing Sherlock Holmes, and Colin Blakely as Dr. Watson does really well. You've got Irene Handel playing Mrs. Hudson, so you've got comedy there from the start. And you've also got Christopher Lee playing Sherlock Holmes' brother Mycroft. Physically very different from Mycroft Holmes, but this one is a lot of fun. There are some extras on it as well. This is a Kino Lorber edition of this. There's Christopher Lee, Mr. Holmes and Mr. Wilder. There's a featurette where they interview Christopher Lee. Interview with the editor, Ernest Walter. Some deleted scenes, additional audio sequences, deleted epilogue scene, and the original theatrical trailer. This is one of the most fun Sherlock Holmes movies in history. And people talk a lot about Sherlock, the series with Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman. Mark Gatiss, who created the Sherlock series, said this was his main influence for that. The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes. Robert Stevens, who was also in The Asphyx, amongst other things, and The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie. Again, another troubled person with alcohol, but in this, his Sherlock Holmes is uniquely his and a little bit different, and quite amused and delighted by the discomfort Dr. Watson feels at various times during the film. It really is a beautifully shot film as well, and there are some really nice locations around Loch Ness, which and Castle Urquhart on Loch Ness, which are a lot of fun as well. Cool movie, eminently rewatchable, beautiful Billy Wilder dialogue and situations. A lot of fun to watch. So there they are. We've hit the letters O and P this time around. And they're all wildly different movies. Next time around, we're going to do Q, R, and S. I think I'll do 3 because there won't be that much in Q, though I do have a few. And I'm not doing Q the Wing Serpent before you ask. So until then, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, do the like, the subscribe, and the notification bell. You can also support the channel a couple of ways. You can become a channel member on YouTube. And you can also support the channel through Patreon at patreon.com/TerryTalksMovies. Next up, I've got some stuff planned for Wednesday, which is going to be a lot of fun. And then, of course, we roll into Science Fiction Saturday. And I've got a couple of movies to talk about then. The fun never ends. So until then, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies, watch some old movies, watch some new movies as well, because I've been doing that and having a wonderful time with it. And I'll catch you next time.